So today I'm going to be talking about avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, or what is commonly referred to as ARFID. So I have coming on maybe 7 years experience working with particularly young children and teenagers with ARFID, and today I'm going to be talking about the treatment of ARFID. But firstly, I'd like to start with discussing what ARFID actually is according to the DSM-5 criteria. So ARFID is an eating or feeding disturbance. So it's apparent lack of interest in eating or food, avoidance based on the sensory characteristics of food, or concerns about adverse consequences of eating, as manifested by persistent failure to meet appropriate nutritional and or energy needs associated with one or more of the following. So firstly, significant weight loss, or failure to achieve expected weight gains, or faltering growth in children. 2, significant nutritional deficiency, and 3, dependence on basically feeding tubes or oral nutritional supplements. And this has marked interference with psychosocial functioning. And the disturbance is not better explained by lack of available food or by an associated cultural practice. So the eating disturbance does not occur exclusively during the course of anorexia nervosa or bulimia nervosa, and there is no evidence of a disturbance in the way in which one's body weight or shape is experienced. So that's the main difference here, is that there's no evidence of a disturbance in how somebody perceives their weight or shape. And lastly, the eating disturbance is not attributable to a concurrent medical condition or not better explained by another mental disorder. When the eating disturbance occurs in the context of another condition or disorder, the severity of the eating disturbance exceeds that routinely associated with the condition or disorder and warrants additional clinical attention. Okay, so there are 3 main reasons why people present with ARFID. So some people with ARFID find that novel foods, so new foods, have strange or intense tastes, textures, or smells, and they feel safer eating foods they know really well. 2, some people with ARFID have scary or frightening experiences with food. So like they've had a history of throwing up, or there's been a choking incident, or perhaps an allergic reaction. So they may avoid the foods that make them sick or stop eating altogether because they're frightened. And then 3, others don't feel hungry very often and think that eating is more of a chore rather than something they enjoy, or perhaps they get full very quickly. So I'm just going to talk about a case study here. Ben's a made-up character based on some characteristics that have pulled apart from other case studies. So he's 14 years old, he's white British. The referral is around significant anxiety with food textures, vomiting and food-related illness, and has had dietitian input and is already under a pediatrician. No psychological support has been given yet. Ben also has an existing diagnosis of ADHD. He's achieving well at school, has a small group of friends, and is subject to ongoing bullying within the school context. Mood is generally okay, and there's worries there around school next year as he's going into his GCSE year. Ben complains about his chest. He feels extremely tired. He often misses the first hour of school as it's difficult to wake him in the morning. Constipation's a frequent problem. His weight is in the normal range for his age and sex. There are no concerns there re body weight and shape, and he lives with his mother and sister and has a great relationship with them. His father's absent, and they're on a single income with financial strain. A recent visit to the GP showed no immediate concerns around his physical health. And I think it's just important to note here that physical investigations are fundamentally important in any eating disorder. And it's always advised to consult with a medical professional when going down this pathway. So I often in practice will pretty much routinely work with the GP or have an open line of communication, or perhaps a psychiatrist if they're seeing a psychiatrist, just given the overlap between psychology and physical health with this type of presentation. So this is the basic ARFID model. We often see that there's perhaps a biological predisposition, which I'll talk to later on in this PowerPoint. Moving into a food-related trauma, so perhaps a choking incident, negative feelings and predictions about the consequences of eating, which results in food restriction, so either variety and or volume. And then we see on the left-hand side here, nutritional compromise, and then on the right-hand side, limited opportunities for exposure. So here's an example here. So a super taster, so somebody that perhaps is born with a higher degree of taste buds. It's a high sensitivity to certain foods and textures and things like that. Perhaps there's been a choking incident, or they've seen someone choke, and they develop certain thoughts or cognitions. It's going to taste disgusting, I'll choke and die. Yeah, fear or anxiety, because they don't like that feeling. They avoid eating foods altogether, certain textures, so it might be chewy, it's often chewy, or there might be certain sort of foods that might be soft or hard, and then they become really restricted. It might be that they only eat certain brands of foods, certain shapes, certain sizes or colour, and yeah, when we see a real nutritional deficiency in a lot of these young people, it could be adults too. So we see these nutritional deficiencies because the range of foods is so limited, so that could be folate or calcium. And so yeah, we generally see really limited opportunities for exposure or trying new foods. So these are the main maintaining factors, or the what would in psychology called the perpetuating factors. So eating the same foods all the time makes new foods taste even more different. So if you're eating the same foods day in and day out, and then you try a new food, because you haven't tried that food before, or you haven't had exposure to similar sort of tasting foods, it seems even more different. There is research to suggest that certain nutritional deficiencies can change the way that a food tastes, so making new foods even less appealing. Eating a particular food over and over may also make you tired of that food and stop eating it altogether. So what's often referred to as food fatigue or a food jag. So that would be, a situation where somebody eats chicken nuggets day in and day out, and then after a couple of years they just get sick of eating chicken nuggets because it's boring, and they develop a food jag. So then that's another food that's removed from the diet. And then we also see safety behaviors, so taking very small bites of food, chewing for longer than needed, so seeing food being turned into a paste. Often dinner time, what should be perhaps half an hour, 45 minutes, turns into 2-hour long event. Only eating in familiar places, so only eating at a certain spot at the dinner table, or a certain spot on the sofa or couch, or not eating at all. So, safety behaviours prevent people with ARFID from testing negative predictions about food. So it maintains those thoughts, or what we refer to as cognitions. The more that eating is avoided, the scarier it becomes to start eating food. And eating irregular amounts of food can dull hunger cues. So if you're eating a limited amount of food, we do see that the hunger cues diminish. And eating too little can promote excessive fullness because the stomach capacity decreases, despite not getting the nutrients that's needed for living. So I'm going to be talking today about a treatment program called CBT-AR, which is developed by Jennifer Thomas and Cameron Eddy. Now, in my experience working with ARFID over the last sort of 6-7 years, this is by far the best treatment program. So this is a book available online for clinicians. It's not made for clients or patients to use directly. It's more of a therapist manual, and to be used in conjunction with the family or the person with ARFID. So yeah, I'll briefly cover it today. So the goals of treatment, this is what treatment is and what treatment isn't. So it's about maintaining a healthy weight. So yeah, we're not asking for the person with ARFID to, eat too much or too little. It's just about maintaining a healthy weight. It's about correcting any nutritional deficiencies. It's about eating foods from the basic 5 food groups, which we'll talk about more later on. So these are fruits, vegetables, proteins, dairy, and grains. Being able to feel more comfortable eating in social situations, so that might be going out for dinner or going to birthday parties or anywhere like that. It's not about changing personality, and it's not about making the person eat unusual foods, and it's definitely not about force feeding, because we don't want to make eating even more aversive experience. So there are 4 stages over 20 to 30 sessions. The first is learning about ARFID and making early changes. So it's keeping records to figure out what maintains the symptoms. And if you're underweight, increase the volume of preferred foods and starting to make early changes to variety. The second stage is continuing on with these early changes and also setting the goals. So you're setting goals to face your fears, increasing volume and or food variety. 3, this is where we spend a lot of time in the treatment program, so it's facing fears, gain exposure with new foods that are perhaps feared, looking at small amounts first and then incorporating larger amounts as time goes on, and then relapse prevention, which is part of most psychological interventions, which is what do you do to then prevent yourself from kind of slipping back into old patterns. So stage 1, so making early changes and learning about ARFID. So this is what we call psychoeducation, which is just a big word for basically learning about ARFID, what maintains it. If underweight, the first thing we need to look at is increasing the volume of preferred foods. So for example, with Ben, we're lucky in the sense that he's not underweight. If he was, we'd be focusing a lot of time here to bring him up to a healthy weight. So that's the most important thing, is if you're underweight, eating more of those preferred foods to bring you up to weight, because when you're physically compromised, that's the most concerning part of ARFID. So it may seem strange, but yes, we encourage people to eat more of the foods that they like, increasing the volume, and we're starting to make early changes to variety. Scheduling meals and snacks to promote hunger cues is very important. So digestion is cyclic, as is sleep, as is a number of other systems in the body. So if we are eating at certain times, then we will see over time, if we're consistent with those times, that you will get hungry prior to meal or snack times. So psychoeducation is a crucial part of ARFID treatment. Parents or the person with ARFID learns that ARFID is not the person's fault, and we hopefully try to strengthen this team concept. So it becomes the person with ARFID, the therapist, and in this case with Ben, his parent, everyone working together to tackle ARFID rather than Ben becoming or Ben being the problem. Big phase of this is monitoring, understanding the young person's diet, figuring out what they are eating, what they're not eating, so we can see what parts of the food group or what of those 5 food groups, what they're eating more of, what they're eating less of, and what they're not eating at all. And we're starting with early kind of variety changes. So look, if the young person's only eating chicken nuggets, then we might look at incorporating just variations in products. So going from McDonald's chicken nuggets to something like Bird's Eye chicken nuggets, this would be considered an early variety change. So yeah, and I've got here increasing weight might be unlikely at tier 2. I initially gave this presentation to a team of people at the NHS where I was working in London, so there might be some reference to tier 2. Tier 2 is essentially a tier where people present with more mild to moderate difficulties, so we have less time to do intervention. So this section is really for increasing the weight of people who are underweight. So there's a number of ways to gain weight. So we're wanting to increase how much food the person's eating. So eating more of the preferred food. So it's okay to eat cookies, candy, ice cream every day if those are the foods that you prefer, because calories are more important than kind of saying, look, that's bad for you, you can't have that. Eat on a regular schedule throughout the day, so 3 meals a day, 3 snacks. Every snack should have multiple components. Yeah, so crackers and peanut butter and milk, so looking at the different food groups if possible. This is really important, so 500 extra calories per day until you're up to a normal weight. And it's really important in psychology. Sometimes we take weights, sometimes we don't. But if the person is underweight, then yeah, again, this is why we stress the importance of working with a general practitioner or perhaps a dietitian, so that this can be monitored. And so we know when the person is within the normal weight range for their age and sex. We want to reduce any physical activity because we don't want the person burning more calories. So we'd kind of focus on actually, while you're gaining weight, let's maybe not play football, let's maybe not play rugby or whatever it is that young person's playing. But this may sound not so good, but again, this is if they are underweight. And for young people, adolescents, it's really important to let parents help by supervising meals and snack times. So just on the right there's just some examples of meals that have 500 calories. So it's just thinking about all the stuff that we might consider unhealthy, like chocolate chip cookies, bagels, pizza, waffles, hot chocolate, and increasing the portion sizes if the young person has a very limited quantity on a daily basis. So when we're recording for CBT-AR or CBT-ARFID, it's pretty basic. We're just looking at the time, we're looking at the food and drink consumed, we're looking at some of the thoughts and feelings at the time. When you're eating, what are you thinking? How are you feeling? Are you anxious? Are you sad? Are you tired? And what are the associated thoughts? So that might be, I'm sick of this, or I feel sick, or this is all too hard, and then any physical sensations too. Stage 2 is continuing early changes and now setting bigger goals. So we often incorporate psychoeducation around nutritional deficiencies here. And this is often where working with a dietitian can be really helpful. So we're looking at things like, what are the physical symptoms that may be present when somebody is nutrient deficient. We're setting big goals. Okay, so if you're a young person, why is it that you're coming to treatment? What do you want to be able to do differently? Often kids will say, well, I can't go to birthday parties because when I go, everyone's eating pizza and burgers and things like that, and I can't do that. So that's often a motivator for them. They want to be able to go to birthday parties, or they want to be able to go to social events. We're continuing to increase volume and all the variety of food. And the important part here is that we're beginning to also reinstate previously eaten foods that may have been excluded due to food fatigue or the food jag. So often I talk to people, I say, okay, well, for Ben, for example, what has he eaten in the past that he no longer eats? Oh, okay, so he used to eat toast with peanut butter, but he no longer eats that because he ate too much of it. But it's been a year since he's eaten that. Okay, this might be one of the first foods that we look at reinstating into his diet, just because it's familiar, it's known, it's not scary, and it might help us with correcting some of these nutritional deficiencies. Stage 2 is also about completing the primary food group building blocks form, which comes with this intervention. So yeah, common nutritional deficiencies, this is just an example. So look, if there's calcium deficiency, these are the signs and symptoms: weak or broken bones, possible treatments. So yeah, pills, chews, wafers, foods that are rich in these nutrients. So milk, cheese, yogurt, and sardines. Again, this is where it's really helpful to work in conjunction with a GP or a dietitian. If there is a deficiency, yeah, we can start with things like pills or chews or wafers or whatever, but it also might mean that when we're doing our treatment, we're looking for certain foods early on in the treatment process to correct that deficiency. So that's why it's important to kind of know what food groups are being eaten on a regular basis and which ones aren't. This is the primary food group building blocks. So basically here with CBT AR, what they've done is, in these a number of pages, all sorts of different foods on it. And this one is just an example here. So we're looking at juices. So what's being consistently eaten, or what are they drinking consistently? Then it's willing to learn about it, question mark, yes or no. And then with exposure and anxiety, we're looking at, tasting something, trying something, 10 times. And I'll go into this in further detail. So consistently eating, going through these different juices. Yep, consistently drinking apple juice, but perhaps not drinking any of these other ones. Yeah, so facing fears, gaining new exposure with new or feared foods. Exposure. So exposure is at the heart of CBT-AR, or CBT for ARFID. It's a delicate process and must be done really systematically, and I think this is where it often falls over for a lot of people. It's not done delicately, and it's not done systematically. So it's very structured, like other eating disorder treatments, and food is tried 10 times on different days, and then the young person or the adult or whoever decides whether or not the food is in or out. We only tend to focus on 2 or 3 foods at a time, so it's not about rushing this process. The treatment package is 20 to 30 sessions long, yes, but that's to kind of learn how to be your own therapist, and then from there, you will be working on this for significant period of time, so you're just taking it easy. So this is the page that I thought was back a few slides ago. So yeah, we know what is being consistently eaten, what is not. So in this case, apple juice. Yep, let's say Ben's drinking this consistently. He's not drinking any of the other ones. Okay, is he willing to try? No, no, yes, could be open to trying mango juice. Yes, could be open to trying orange juice. Okay, so when we have a no and then a yes, then we may think about one of those foods or one of those liquids being incorporated into the treatment plan. So this is an example of what that might look like. Okay, so mango juice, and what this picture is showing is that it's been tried 3 times, whereas orange juice has been tried 9 times. Pineapple juice has been tried once. So every time it's tried, and this is again on different days, we put an X. By the time you get to the 10th try, you might ask the person with ARFID, look, is this something you're willing to include in your diet or not? And they may say yes, no, or I'm not phased. If they're not phased and it's a young person, then it's important to encourage over time to drink this juice or to eat this food. So stage 3 considerations. Again, this is targeted more at young people, so it's a young person led, they're in control. It's important to have control with anxiety. Parents or caregivers are considered to be cheerleaders. When we're thinking about goals, we're thinking about setting SMART goals. If you don't know about SMART goals, a lot of this information is on the internet, so setting goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and timely. And it's about setting goals that are 70 to 80% likely. So setting the young person up for success. When you're trying foods, it'll be less scary if it's smaller. So it's a thumbnail size, or it's a sip of liquid, or it's a finger dip into something. So taste is the last part of the process, and you need to consider exposure more broadly. So exposure to foods might be helping with online shopping, if that's how you do your supermarket shopping. It might be going to the supermarket and actively being involved in the process of picking out foods, or discussions about certain products that catch the eye. It might be the involvement in cutting foods, cooking, serving, anything like this. And the confusion between anxiety and taste is that, and I see this a lot, is that the person will say they don't like the taste, but it's because they're anxious at the same time. So it's about differentiating what is anxiety and what is actually the taste. So yeah, asking yourself these 5 questions when approaching a new food. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? And yeah, what's the texture? So just taking a lot of time, slowing down, giving yourself a huge amount of time as the anxiety settles, to just really explore it in a descriptive way, trying to avoid whether it's good or bad, but being a bit more descriptive. Okay, it's green and it's soft and it's a bit rough here and it's got a blemish here and it kind of smells a bit fruity. And then moving into the taste, sweet, salty, sour, rather than this is disgusting. I'm aware that this happens a lot, but it's important to encourage exploration, being more descriptive. These are some strategies for exposure, which are extremely helpful. So this is the fading in strategy. It's more around starting with preferred foods. So if the child or the young person or whoever likes applesauce, then you might first start with something like trying apple. The flavour is already familiar, but of course the texture and presentation is different. So we're fading it in. Add some spice, so preferred condiments. So like if your child or young person likes salt or they like mustard, then yeah, you might add those condiments, or tomato sauce, you might add those condiments to new foods. It may seem a little odd, but that's okay to help transition to trying new foods. So you might be having tomato sauce with whatever. Could be a very strange combination, but that's what we're doing. Chain it to a goal. So yeah, if you, for example, prefer potato chips, then it might be trying veggie chips. So yeah, using a preferred food to chain to a novel food. So what's another example of this? Yeah, it might be if you perhaps like hot chips or deep fried chips, or fries, then it might be moving into something like potato chips, something like that. Just trying to make the exposure process less daunting, and it's sort of linked to something that's already familiar. This is the presentation of changing the presentation. Yeah, so it might be cooked versus raw. Yeah, so you might, if you're eating, or if the young person's eating, raw apple, or just eating apple how it normally comes, then it might be about bringing in something like an apple pie where the apple's cooked. Or it might be looking at fermented foods that are already consistently being sort of eaten in their unfermented form. And then the deconstruction method is all around, if you haven't tried pizza, try starting with one component and then layer on. So if you're bread and cheese, okay. Next thing, might add the sauce, the base sauce. Then you might add another one, add a food that's been incorporated. So you're building up to it. I'll just briefly kind of go through this. This is exposure to reduce fears about eating. So I talked about this earlier on. The longer you avoid anxiety, the more anxiety grows and the less you feel you can cope with your fears. So you create an exposure hierarchy and use a SUD scale, which stands for subjective units of distress, 1 to 100. So one at a time you face your fears, and then you see your anxiety decrease over time. So yeah, the best way to learn whether your prediction will really come true and that you can cope with your fear is to eat foods that you fear. And then that's how you gather information. And what happens over time is that with exposure, there's anxiety at first, but will ultimately decrease as you keep practicing. So if you're anxious about eating a chicken nugget from a different brand, if you eat the chicken nugget 10 times, your anxiety is likely to be much less on the 10th time than it was on the first time. And then this is a hierarchy. And yeah, we start with foods very low down on the hierarchy, that don't seem so scary, that sort of higher in that 70 to 80% likely, sort of achievable, and then we slowly work our way up. And hierarchy is used, exposure hierarchy is used for many different types of anxieties, social anxiety, phobias. It's a very important part because of the role that it plays in changing the way that we think about the feared situation. And the last stage is relapse prevention. So it's about keeping a sort of a personalized plan. And again, it's just about kind of going through each one of these stages, writing things down. What are the red flags that you might be kind of relapsing into old ways, or moving into old ways? Thinking about the techniques to continue to try on own, on your own, after treatment's completed. So again, treatment of ARFID with a therapist, it might be 20 sessions, and at the end of it you might be eating 10, 15 new foods. But we know there's a full range of foods out there. There's hundreds, thousands of foods, different foods to be eating. So once your own therapist and the parental caregiver knows about this program, treatment resumes long after work has been done with the therapist. So yeah, just in terms of process considerations, these are just things that I've thought about throughout my journey with ARFID. It's being aware that eating has become an aversive experience with a young person. There will often be conflict in the belief that the young person has become the problem. So consider using a narrative approach, making ARFID the problem. So this is the idea that we're a team, and that ARFID's the problem, not the young person or the person with ARFID. I'm also aware that by the time people come into my office, eating has been really hard. Dinner time has consisted of yelling matches, force feeding, tears, loud voices. It's a horrible experience, and this just happens out of desperation. And parents want the best for their children. They don't want to see them skinny. They don't want to see them nutrient deficient. So we can understand how this happens, and it happens a lot. So monitoring, blaming, rushing. Rushing's a big one. It's often trying to get through it as fast as possible. We really need to slow down. And with young children, there's not a lot of internal motivation to try new foods. And we may need to think about reward systems for trying new foods. So if you try a food once, what is your point system? Can they accumulate points to then cash in for certain rewards? Is it that if you try a food 5 times or 10 times, you end up going out to play mini golf or to the movie theatre? For clinicians looking at this, your job is to teach the young person how to be their own therapist. Again, you're there working with them for the first part of treatment, and then afterwards, and they go home, they should have the skills and knowledge to keep doing it on their own, maybe with a follow-up session just to see how everything's going. And it may be at the end of treatment that they're only eating 3 or 4 new foods, but at least they've kind of got the experience and their understanding of the process, and they know what they need to do. At the end of 20 or 30 sessions, I'd expect the young person or whoever to be eating more than this. This is more kind of designed or targeted towards those coming through the tier 2 service that I was talking about, where treatment funding is limited, and it may be that they're only coming in for 6 to 10 sessions or something like that. So that's the end of this presentation on ARFID. Obviously, this is a brief presentation. It kind of goes over the treatment program, CBT AR. If you've got any questions or you want any additional support, feel free to get in contact. I work for myself. I'm happy to answer any questions, and if you want any further consultation, then we can set this up at another time. Treatment is a long process, and if you follow the steps and you do it systematically and you take your time, you'd be amazed at what people can achieve. So thanks very much for listening, and any questions, get in touch.